Podcast creator Elise Hanneman decides to help Daniel Kahn get the girl of his dreams, Tanya Schultz, before Christmas. As she spends more time helping him, her feelings start changing. During a training session of sword choreography with Jacqueline Snyder, Elise gets useful tips that help her win. She wants to know Jacqueline's last thoughts about her career for her podcast, who thinks sword choreography is like a dance with an opponent. While she had a lot of fun, Elise won't include these sessions in her podcast since she doesn't like to involve herself in any story. She brings a special Christmas dessert to office from Helena's Bakery and informs her colleague, Bonnie Medley, about her sessions with Jacqueline. She wants to tell the story by using sword choreography as a metaphor for conflict and communication. Bonnie is planning a Christmas pub crawl with Max and wants Elise to join them, but she's more focused on perfecting her mom's mulled cider recipe, whom she misses a lot during the holidays. Bonnie still thinks she's in New York and needs to celebrate Christmas this time in a better way. Their boss, Janice, is looking for Elise for a review session about her podcast, Life and the Like, which Elise thinks might be in danger. Bonnie's meeting about her podcast, Live Life Winning, was a lot more successful since it's also very famous. As Elise wants to avoid Janice at any cost, she sneaks out of the office to work from home. Daniel, who is a creative director at an ad agency, tries to give an enthusiastic presentation about the cooking app, Sous Vide, and tries to focus on how recipes help people connect. He's trying to incorporate cartoon characters like elves in his pitch to go with the Christmas theme. His client Beth Barca seems very disinterested and insists that she's looking for something more alive and raw before their pitch presentation on December 23rd. Brian thinks he can still give the Christmas account to Nadia, since he's very bad at everything Christmas, but he feels like he wants to do everything to win this account for the agency. He's trying to get more inspired about Christmas, now that he's going to spend it in Vermont with his childhood friend, Tanya's family, the Schultzes. Brian remembers something from Bonnie's podcast about two people ignoring what's in front of them and thinks Daniel and Tanya will be a perfect couple, but he decides to ignore this comment. Elise has prepared another batch of mulled cider, but it still seems to be missing something. She's nervous about her meeting with Janice and wonders if she should pitch some new podcasts, since Janice is from a true crime background and might want something more exciting. Bonnie thinks her podcast is authentic and comes from the heart, so she should stick to it. Daniel is excited about the drive to Tanya's parents' house, but the plan has been canceled because a pine tree fell on their roof, and they don't feel like hosting Christmas this year. They're coming to New York instead, and she's excited about them meeting her boyfriend Cliff. She spent a great weekend with him, and now that she knows he's a Christmas guy, she is confident about her parents loving him when he comes to town on Christmas Eve. She casually mentions Daniel can join them too, but it feels like she thinks it'll be too crowded with him there. When he wipes some raspberry jam from her chin, Daniel gets some feelings for her he never thought he had. In advertising terms, he admits to Brian that he has started seeing Tanya differently as more than a friend. He's irritated about her new boyfriend, so Brian suggests he can ask for advice from Live Life Winning, who are doing call-ins for a Christmas episode. Janice wants an update on the numbers of every broadcast show, especially Elise's, since she can't get hold of her. While trying to hide from Janice, Elise finds Bonnie preparing for her Christmas call-in. She was about to do it alone but gives Elise a headset so she can co-host with her. When they're live, Bonnie explains they'll answer all holiday questions with a special guest, Miss Yuletide, who is a Christmas expert. Daniel calls them using the alias, Kris Kringle, and explains his situation with Tanya. Since his family is Pakistani and not big on Christmas, he explains how Tanya's family adopts him every year for the holidays, without mentioning any names. He was excited about their visit to Vermont this year, but now he doesn't know if he's invited or not because of Tanya's boyfriend. He wants some strategy to become the better Christmas guy so he can win her heart. Bonnie asks Miss Yuletide to take this question, who seems annoyed by it. Elise thinks it's weird he is suddenly interested in a woman now that she's unavailable and simply thinks he should leave her alone. He thinks of Christmas as a commodity and thinks he can compete to get the better Christmas spirit to win her heart. But Elise views the Christmas spirit as something magical and not strategic. Since he seems impatient and wants a sort of playbook to help him, Elise calls him condescending and scolds him about being more concerned about winning Christmas than finding his Christmas spirit. Janice finally gets hold of Elise, but isn't too happy with the name of her podcast. She doesn't understand the long-form storytelling like Elise does and prefers something more sensational. Elise thinks listeners want to know about people's lives, but that's too boring for Janice. She wants the kind of sassiness she heard from Elise during her talk with Kris Kringle, which is trending on social media. Elise starts ranting about him being an indecisive man, who only wants a woman because she's not available and thinks of Christmas as a game he needs to win. Janice finds the pitch she's looking for in her rant and wants Elise to talk to Kris Kringle again to help him get the girl. She can make her podcast seem like she's helping him become a better Christmas guy when she will actually find ways to help him get the girl before her boyfriend arrives. She's excited about how this story can pan out and asks Elise to release a whole series by Christmas Eve. To help it look like Kris is helping his friend's family get the perfect New York Christmas experience, she's ready to set them up at a luxury rental. Bonnie gets Daniel's details and knows Elise needs to convince him for the podcast if she wants Here and Now to continue producing her work. Daniel leaves a message for his father, asking about how he and his mother are celebrating Christmas this year. Elise turns up at his office to apologize for the other day and claims she wants to help him with his mission. She wants to feature his journey in a podcast by combining the playbook he mentioned with her help as a Christmas expert to become the better Christmas guy in front of Tanya and her family. She also explains that the real mission would be to help him win Tanya over. They will have to record everything, but she thinks it'll make his love story worth sharing with the world, especially since there's also a holiday rental for her family in the deal. Daniel feels like he doesn't want to fool the family, but Elise insists the podcast will help him spend more time with them. Before she leaves, he asks her to send him the link of the rental anyway. Daniel tries to be very chivalrous with Tanya, which makes her think he's acting weird. She's worried about how her family will fit into her tiny apartment when Daniel shares the offer he got that day. He mentions Elise's podcast and claims he met her after a heated debate. She has challenged him to show Tanya's family the best Christmas in New York, which he has refused since he doesn't want an annoying woman recording them all the time. Tanya thinks her parents would want to talk about their love for Christmas, and after looking at photos of the luxury rental, she is completely sold. Elise is listening to excerpts from her Jacqueline podcast when she gets a call from Daniel, confirming that he's excited to work with her. Elise starts researching with a strategy about Christmas activities when Bonnie thinks she can just step outside and let the city help her plan. She starts recording her podcast about trying to become an expert on Christmas with some guidebooks so she can prepare a playbook to help Chris get his girl. She brings Daniel to the rental where he asks for a proper strategy, but Elise thinks they should focus on the Christmas experience and let the results come naturally. They're preparing for Tanya's family to arrive soon and she starts recording. Daniel has some guides similar to what she already used, but she hides them and thinks they can use personalized stockings instead, to set the mood. Daniel doesn't like that there's one for Cliff and throws it away like a child. She's trying to make Manhattans with a Christmas twist, from her mom's recipe, but Daniel is more concerned about how vague her plan seems. She thinks he lacks patience and assures him they're on the same team. She wants to make the family's experience more personal and is waiting to meet them. When Tanya's family arrives, Elise starts recording their reactions. She even records the moment Daniel takes Tanya's coat, but has to admit it feels very awkward. She first talks to Tanya's mom, Patty, who thinks Christmas in New York will be like a new adventure. Tanya's dad, Fred, thinks Patty always tries too hard to make everyone's Christmas special, so he's glad she can take a break this time. He has also started photography and is excited to see how it goes for him. Tanya was concerned about making her parents' Christmas special, but is very relieved that Daniel has taken over as their Christmas guide, and thinks of him as a great friend. She also feels that when she saw Cliff's name on the stocking when she entered, it just felt right to her. Daniel thinks their plan is working, but Elise feels like they should find out if Tanya loves him first before recording hours of footage. She doesn't want his heart to break since she currently thinks there's nothing between them, but Daniel thinks she just lacks competitive spirit and has an idea of his own. As their guide, he takes them to the famous chestnut guy in New York who moves around a lot, which makes him so special during Christmas. Tanya's parents are excited and even she admits bringing them there was extraordinary. When she notices the look Tanya gives Daniel, Elise thinks there might be some hope for him. Elise has no idea about her next step and is sure Daniel can tell that too. When she looks through her guide, she comes up with a plan for giving the family a Christmas classic. She thinks a stroll down Fifth Avenue to look at the Christmas displays would be the perfect activity. She brings peppermint hot chocolate for Daniel, who seems more confident since he also noticed the look Tanya gave him the other night. Elise clarifies that she's always recording because she knows the best material can be found in unexpected moments. They decide to do a dry run of the displays before they get Tanya's family there. Daniel is excited about discussing what's happening in the displays, and while they think the first one looks like the deer is going to an ugly sweater party, the second one concerns Elise, since the workers are not wearing gloves. She thinks the last one looks like him and Tanya on Christmas Eve as they dance, and realize their love for each other. Daniel brings the family to Fifth Avenue that night as their guide, which her parents love. As Elise watches, Tanya seems distracted on her phone since she's discussing something with Cliff. Daniel is excited to know her opinion on the displays, but she doesn't notice anything great about them. She's just happy he got her family there. Elise updates her podcast about Daniel and thinks that he had a setback that day in terms of interest from Tanya. She feels they might not be right for each other and wonders what it means for her podcast. As she tries the dessert, she listens to an old recording of her mom talking about window displays. Daniel has a fresh idea for their app about cooking being romantic, but Brian doesn't know if they should add the romance angle in their campaigns. Daniel wants to inspire people now with the ad, and is excited about having two people in different kitchens, who are looking at each other with love. Janice thinks the family is too nice, and a lot of danger and drama is missing from their story. Elise clarifies if their plan is still to guide Daniel, but Janice scraps that because she wants more things to go wrong. She thinks they're not doing justice to the love triangle, since Cliff isn't there yet, and everything seems to be falling flat. Daniel leaves another message for his dad about how he conveyed the Christmas spirit in his pitch before he meets Elise. He just wants to be direct about his feelings with Tanya now and fast-track the process, but Elise doesn't think it will not make for a great story. Daniel reminds her they're talking about his real life, so she pitches another strategy inspired by his point of view. She asks him about some activities they usually do in Vermont for Christmas, and successfully also finds a place for snowshoeing in New York. Tanya's family wasn't expecting to do snowshoeing this year, and Daniel is very proud of Elise for coming up with this. Patty stays behind when they all rush to get some hot chocolate. She understands how important it is for Elise to keep recording all the time and admits that she listens to her podcast. She thinks they're very reflective and warm, which makes Elise feel very good about herself. When Daniel and Tanya get into a snowball fight, Patty mentions how competitive they are. She also feels like Daniel and Elise have known each other for a long time because of the way they interact. When Fred calls her for hot chocolate, Tanya comes over to thank Elise for everything she has done for them. She also wants advice from her as a woman, since she's feeling conflicted about Daniel. She loves Cliff, but she doesn't know why she's having some feelings for Daniel out of nowhere, when they've known each other for 30 years. Elise admits he's a great guy and it looked like they were both in a rom-com earlier. Tanya knows it feels like a classic love story, but when she thinks about Cliff, there's an excitement in her stomach she can't explain. Elise points out the love triangle and suggests that if Cliff can somehow make it back early, she would know better about her feelings. Tanya confirms if everything they discussed was off the record, and Elise assures her she will never put anything in the podcast without her permission. After the success of that day, Daniel brings an ice cream in the cold for Elise, which he thinks is better enjoyed outdoors since it doesn't melt. She feels like they should focus on a strategy to bring him closer to Tanya and mentions that if Cliff was there, they could have had some sort of a competition to prove he's better. Daniel seems a lot more relaxed and wants to take a step back, since he's not in a hurry to reach the end results. He discusses his parents' advertising company in London, which he manages in New York to keep it more relevant. Since they're so busy with the year-end work, it feels like his family has made it a tradition to not be together on Christmas, which upsets him. She asks him to just invite them over and see how it goes, but he's more curious to know how she's spending Christmas. Since she doesn't want to talk about it, he asks her to show him her favorite New York Christmas tradition. She takes him to Helena's bakery, which is about to close, but Lola has kept a box aside for her. She introduces Daniel as her latest podcast subject and shares that she has been coming to get their Christmas cookies since a long time. She brings him to a park in Little Italy, which became her spot for enjoying these cookies when her mother passed away 2 years ago, and she only noticed it after she was gone. He thinks her journey is interesting enough to put it in her podcast, but this makes her feel closer to him, so she reminds him they should stick to their plan of getting him and Tanya closer. She's eager to run away from him, but Daniel stops her and thanks her for sharing something so special and intimate with him. At the game night, Fred asks Daniel to pose with Elise, and they both ask him for the pictures when he uploads them. They need an even number of players for the next game, but Patty refuses to let Elise sit it out and wants her to team up with Daniel. Fred and Patty also invite her for Christmas and know they would love her company. Tanya surprises them all with Cliff, who has arrived early. Even if he's taken aback, Daniel gets up to politely greet him. Janice wants a lot more conflict and wonders how they can highlight the love triangle. She doesn't care about Cliff's early arrival because the love triangle between Tanya, Daniel, and Elise is fascinating her more. Elise's feelings about Daniel seem very clear to Janice from the footage, and she thinks even her denial can make the story juicy. She doesn't have time to review it before the podcast releases, so she asks Elise to not let her down. Elise doesn't like lying to Tanya's family and feels guilty about her hand in Cliff coming there early. She doesn't want to betray Daniel also because she likes working with him. Bonnie has noticed some changes in her recently, and even Elise admits she and Daniel shared a moment. But it doesn't matter because she's taking a step back and sticking to the original plan of helping Daniel get Tanya. For the grand finale activity, she has also planned carriage rides through Central Park. Tanya and Cliff seem very happy together, but Elise has planned the schedule so Daniel gets to ride the carriage with Tanya. She announces that Cliff will ride with Fred and Patty, but Fred thinks he should spend more time with Tanya since he just arrived. Cliff mentions he would like to ride with them and so does Daniel, so they end up deciding through a game. And while Elise finally rides with Patty and Fred, Daniel gets stuck with Cliff and Tanya. Cliff strikes up a conversation about how long they have known each other and Daniel makes some awkward comments about setting up his stocking with Elise. Cliff assumes Daniel is dating Elise since they seem close, but Tanya assures him she's only there for the podcast. While Patty and Fred enjoy the ride with Elise, Daniel feels out of place with the happy couple. Patty and Fred love Cliff for Tanya since he makes her very happy, and admit that even if Daniel is their favorite person, and used to root for him and Tanya to get together, they don't think so anymore. They're afraid if something goes wrong with Tanya and Daniel, they will lose him, and they want to make sure he stays in their life. But Patty is sure Cliff and Tanya seem like a perfect match and gives Elise a knowing look when she suggests Daniel will find his match too. Christmas Eve is approaching, so Elise wants Daniel to make his grand gesture soon. She needs one more interview with him, but while she's out checking her dish, Danielle notices the guide she has been using. She's working on her mom's spice cakes and she wants to try out her recipes before she forgets them. She tries to hide the guides from him when she's back, but he has already seen them and isn't surprised she used them to help out Tanya's family. She wants him to know that however his story with Tanya ends, Tanya's family will always love him. But Daniel thinks there's a different angle to the story now since he has become more interested in her. Elise can't help blushing when she goes to check on the dessert, and Daniel decides to start listening to her recordings. He also hears the part about her suggesting to Tanya that Cliff should come early and assuring her that she's not recording that conversation. Elise hears him listening to it and tries to explain that she realized later that her recorder was on. She clarifies that she meant what she told Tanya about not using it in the podcast. He doesn't believe when she said they're on the same team, because he now knows she conspired to bring Cliff back early, so it becomes more difficult for him. She admits she was confused about something her boss said, but when she realized her mistake, she went back to the original plan. She doesn't think that matters now since they like each other, but Daniel is having second thoughts because he's sure he can't trust her anymore. He refuses to do the podcast but requests her to not make fun of the family if she decides to release it. Elise is sure she has ruined everything, and wasn't even able to tell him how she feels. She doesn't know if she should drop the podcast or try to work with something without making fun of the Schultzes. Bonnie reminds her that she's still a very important part of this story, and it's worth exploring from her own perspective. She tries to listen to the recordings and starts editing it. Daniel informs Tanya about them not recording the podcast anymore and confesses that he was trying to win her love since he was afraid of being replaced by Cliff. Tanya is relieved to hear that he has realized they're just friends and admits she also thought about that possibility briefly. He still feels bad about lying to her parents, but she thinks they at least had a great Christmas in the process. Bonnie brings enough food for Elise to work on her podcast, but she's still confused about whether she wants Daniel to listen to it when she's done. Daniel reviews the romantic angle in his ad and feels like they should go with their original plan of elves for the pitch presentation. He tries to be enthusiastic about the elves in his presentation, but Beth feels like she's not connecting with this idea. This makes Daniel think of instances from his personal life, and he shows them the photos from his vacation with the Schultzes, while describing how it feels to spend Christmas with a family you have built through connections. When he comes across a picture of Elise, he describes how excited she gets when she uses cooking as a way to connect with her late mother, and feels like it's very difficult to capture such magical moments, even for someone in advertising. He apologizes for not giving Beth what she wanted, but she loves the picture of him with Elise and knows that's the kind of alive and raw content she wanted, and decides to give him her account. Elise reviews the conclusion of her podcast where she admits she got involved in the story and fell in love. Nervous about the results, she sends it across for release. Daniel leaves another message for his dad, asking him to come for Christmas next year so he can show them around. Elise is curled up on her couch when she gets a message from Janice to call her. Janice is very excited about her podcast trending on social media and loves how Elise has constructed it. She doesn't understand this type of storytelling, but admits she was interested in listening to how it ends. She decides to let Elise keep her podcast and even thinks she can head her own department after the holidays. Daniel arrives for Christmas Eve lunch with Tanya's family but notices the awkwardness in the air. He apologizes to Cliff for trying to hit on Tanya, but he doesn't blame him and they laugh it off. He's also excited about getting the account for his agency and thanks Fred for his photos. Patty feels strange not having Elise around, which brings them to the topic of her podcast. Fred has decided to listen to it after Christmas, but Patty is sure Elise wouldn't put anything problematic in it. Elise leaves a message for Bonnie, informing her that she finally figured out the missing ingredient in her mom's cider, which is rosemary. She toasts to her mom and decides to head out to celebrate Christmas. Daniel is excited about his parents agreeing to come to New York. Patty confesses that she has listened to Elise's podcast and is sure he might want to listen to it too, especially the ending. Daniel finally gives in and starts listening to the podcast, where Elise has addressed him as Kris Kringle to protect his identity. She describes how much Kris annoyed her initially with everything he did. She admits that when she saw him get closer to Tanya while snowshoeing, she urged her to invite Cliff early because she didn't want Daniel to succeed. She doesn't know when she started having feelings for him, but when they were outside the window display of the couple, she wanted it to be them. She feels bad about lying to him and not kissing him in the park when she had the chance. Elise scrolls through the pictures with Daniel when he turns up there and thanks her for urging him to invite his parents. He clarifies that he's just friends with Tanya and mentions how badly he wanted her podcast to end a certain way. When she thinks the end is still uncertain, he kisses her in the park. Patty has invited them over, but now that he's with Elise, Daniel is more interested in kissing her again.